Hey guys, welcome into the 14. My name's Nick Cole, and it's week 3 in the SEC season. We're walking through each game from a betting perspective to try to help you make some money. And today, we're talking about the Mississippi State Bulldogs versus the Memphis Tigers. This game's actually being played at the Liberty Bowl in Memphis on Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern. The game's going to be on ESPN2. This line opened as Mississippi State is a 3-point favorite, and it's moved slightly. The Bulldogs are now favored by 3.5 points. The over-under has moved a little more substantially through the week. It opened at 58.5 and it's moved up to 64. Bringing in our betting analyst, Christopher Smith. Christopher, what do you think about this matchup between a mid-tier SEC school and a pretty good Memphis team?
Yeah, anytime Mike Leach coaches a team, it makes me think about the Forrest Gump quote, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. You really don't ever know what you're going to get out of a Mississippi State game under Mike Leach. And so I think Memphis is always entertaining for a group of 5 teams. So we should be in for a fun one in Memphis. But why don't you take us through Nick's news and notes? Tell us about the weather, injuries, and whatever other headlines are going on around these programs.
Sure. So let's start with the weather. Much like the rest of the league, we're looking at a chance of rain, some scattered thunderstorms through the area during game time. You're going to be in the low 80s for this afternoon kickoff, 50% chance on the rain again, and then 7 to 8 miles per hour on the wind. So nothing too crazy. Obviously, we've got a chance that there could be some voltage, some lightning or something like that. But the rain, as Christopher likes to say, doesn't have a huge impact. And so I think we should have the recipe for plenty of points maybe in this game. Thinking about the notes for this, I'll start with just looking at, you mentioned you never know what you're going to get from Mike Leach, but you really, really don't. And the first 2 weeks of this season are a perfect example of that. Week 1, we're talking about them almost losing a game, probably should have lost a game to Louisiana Tech. It took a miracle comeback to beat them by 1 point at home. Then you roll into a week 2 game, where I know you were big on NC State, and a lot of the numbers pointed towards NC State being the better team entering that game. And State didn't trail. They won that game from beginning to end. Now, returning a kickoff at the opening of the game and never looking back helps. Winning the turnover battle helps. And maybe that covered up some deficiencies in other areas of their game. You may want to get into that a little bit later when we start talking about betting this game. But it's just really an interesting turnaround from 1 week to the next. It makes you wonder, what exactly are we going to see from Mississippi State in week 3? And the next thing, I'd turn things over to Memphis a little bit. I want to give a number to you guys, and it's 1,361. And you want to say, well, what's the significance of 1,361? That's the amount of yards that both offenses put up in last week's game between Memphis and Arkansas State. That's right. Almost 700 yards per team. And this game didn't go to overtime, by the way. This game was settled in regulation. Memphis won 55-50 in Jonesboro against Butch Jones's Arkansas State Red Wolves, in a game that, if you were paying any attention, we probably all should have bet the over, and it cleared pretty easily there. But Tigers' true freshman quarterback, Seth Hannigan, threw for 417 yards and 5 touchdowns in that game. So maybe something to look out for Mississippi State coming into this game. That's a pretty impressive performance, even against a group of 5 school like Arkansas State, for a true freshman. And then the last thing I want to point out is that I'm just excited that we're rekindling this series. This is a game that actually has been played 44 times, but it hasn't been played since 2011. So we're resuming after a decade off between these schools that really are only like 163 miles apart from Liberty Bowl to the Mississippi State campus. Mississippi State's got a 12-game winning streak in this game, so Memphis got a little bit to prove. And lucky for Mississippi State, they haven't played in the last decade, because Memphis has been pretty good for the last decade, or better parts of that decade. So you have to wonder, if they had played, if Memphis wouldn't have broken that streak already. But yeah, 163 miles, so that's a pretty drivable distance for the Mississippi State faithful, just across the border into Tennessee. And so we'll probably see quite a few cowbells on Saturday afternoon, if I were guessing. Christopher, from a betting perspective, any of this make any sense to you?
Well, first of all, I'm still pretty salty about that Mississippi State, NC State game. And I'm sorry, Bulldogs fans, but that was a fraudulent score. I mean, they're up 24-3 late in that game, but you already mentioned the opening kickoff that Mississippi State returned for a touchdown. You also kind of alluded to this, but +3 in turnover margin, and that includes an interception in the end zone off of like an 88-yard drive that NC State put together. What it doesn't include is NC State had a 1st and goal also in the second half that they had a turnover on downs on. It also doesn't include NC State missing a field goal. So NC State had more yards, more first downs, I think even more yards per play than Mississippi State. But Mississippi State incredibly fortunate at this point, and they did trail Louisiana Tech 34-14 in the 4th quarter just 2 weeks ago. And I will say the one thing that I was wrong on completely and that I was stunned about is that they held NC State to 1.3 yards per carry. And that's even with Devin O'Leary at quarterback, who I think is a pretty good ACC quarterback, kind of providing a threat there. So I will say Mississippi State's run defense looks very impressive. But this game is on the road, not at home. And LSU is next week. So not a great schedule spot for Mississippi State, looking ahead to that game maybe a little bit. But I think the story for Memphis is no matter who's the head coach, no matter who's the quarterback, no matter who the skill players are, they just keep reloading on offense, and they're still explosive. Nick, you mentioned Seth Hennigan, 682 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions in 2 games. Brandon Thomas, 9.9 yards per carry. Rodriguez Clark, 8.1 yards per carry. So this offense can still catch you with some explosive plays, and we'll see if they can do that against Mississippi State. But the one thing else that I'll note is Memphis's defensive coordinator is Mike McIntyre. Now, he was the head coach at Colorado from 2013 to 2018. And of course, Colorado played Washington State 4 times in the Pac-12 while Mike Leach was the head coach. So he will know the Leach offense. He will know what everyone in the SEC has figured out about dropping 8 into coverage. So I expect a competitive game from that standpoint. But Nick, why don't you tell us who you think is going to get us to the betting window this week?
Yeah, so actually, I'm really excited about Memphis in this game. Some of the reasons you just rattled off about Mississippi State being fortunate to not be 0-2 right now in some ways. I look at Memphis and I say, this is a team with skill, a team that can score, and a team that, quite frankly, is probably laying in wait for the SEC school to come into the Liberty Bowl. And they I can think back in recent times, we're waiting on a very good Ole Miss team and beat them. Obviously, different cast of characters, different coach, but just a reminder that this is one of the better Group of 5 schools. And if you're giving them 3.5 points at home, I'm glad to take it. So give me Memphis plus 3.5. And then for the same reason that I like Memphis to win this game, I like the over 64. I think their offense is very good. And I think that from a Mississippi State standpoint, we're starting to see the next tier of the air raid offense. You know, you listen to Mike Leach talk about how it's not anywhere near fully installed yet, but year 2 is starting to prove to be a little bit more complex than year 1, where everybody was just dropping 8 defenders, right, and then seeing what they could do. You can't just do that this year so far anyway. So I like both of these teams to score. Give me the over 64. How are you seeing this?
Yeah, I mean, on the total, I'm staying far away from it with my own money. I know Memphis put up a gajillion points and a gajillion yards against Arkansas State. This is not Arkansas State's defense. And we'll see if those younger players at Memphis can do the same thing on offense as they did. I mean, Mississippi State's game was 24-10, even with a special team score last week. So I will go with the over. Very hesitant on that, and I wouldn't bet it. And also give me Memphis plus 3.5. It's not one of my favorite plays of the week, I don't think, but if you're going to give me the hook, and considering I think Mississippi State's riding a little high in the market right now, maybe a little puffed up in terms of their value. And honestly, I would not be surprised if the loser of next week's Mississippi State LSU game actually finishes last in the SEC West this year. So I do think that's a huge game for both programs. And I think Mississippi State will be ready to go, and they can't overlook Memphis. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, give me Memphis plus 3.5 and over 64. Not the bets that I feel the most confident about this week, but that's what I'm sticking to. For Nick Cole, I'm Christopher Smith for the 14, and we'll talk to you next week.